just a free commercial for you for what is coming up next after the break.
Well, I just started up the live stream again because your camera was running slow, so I had to restart it. So they got none of that.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Then it will be a mystery.
I think we came back on you saying just a small preview for you.
So when you restart OBS, and do you have to restart the stream too?
Yeah.
So you have to put the stream key in and do all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So do we have to go back in and repost a different link to a different podcast or to a different thing?
Mayhaps.
Anybody who's watching
What I usually do is I just post a link to the channel, because if we're live streaming, it'll that'll be just on the homepage of the YouTube channel.
Gotcha.
And it'll say that we're live.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
it's Dunzo.
It's Dunzo.
Oh, we're live again.
Yeah. We are currently live.
I'm still slow motion. No, I'm not. I move slow. Never
Yeah.
mind.
Well, also on YouTube, there's a small delay.
Right. Yeah. No. This was just me being dumb. Because I was reaching for my phone to see if it was working. I came back up and saw me moving super slow.
Good times.
Embarrassing.
Yeah.
Embarrassing. Okay.
This table is so pointy.
Mm-hmm. It was built by Scott Federhoff.
What a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb, you should start a t-shirt printing company.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. Why haven't you done that yet, Caleb?
Cuts and crafts.
Yeah, you've said stuff like that a few times, and you've really made me consider it.
Are we still live?
We are live right now.
I would really like that as well.
I would love for you to start a t-shirt company.
I don't have a t-shirt company right now. As of right now, I don't have a t-shirt company that I
probably, maybe this isn't the best time to mention it, but do we have any church merch?
Church merch? We're looking for a
merch.
company. See, my son worked for a company, and we printed some stuff up, but then we changed the logo, and since we changed it, we were waiting, and then he left that company just at that time, so I haven't got a new company that I'm... Do you know somebody? You want to recommend somebody right here, right on YouTube, on the live stream?
No. I do not want to do that.
Okay. All right. Okay. I know that I have been to a couple of places like other people have done, and I've not been massively impressed.
Yeah.
So I'm holding back, waiting for somebody.
You can talk trash. You didn't say anyone specific,
That's
so
right.
no one's going to know who you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So
They'll just have to narrow it down to a church you've been to, which I assume is a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, I won't say what it is. It was something that Jake and I were at together.
Yeah,
Well, that narrowed it down quite a bit
We
more.
have the same shirt.
I knew exactly where you were talking about as soon as you said it.
I didn't have to go any further, but I did anyway. And maybe they need to hear it. Maybe they need to know.
Well,
I'm sure
I
they're...
see them. Well, no, I'm not going to say anything.
Which is really funny.
Yeah.
Because it would be the most amazing thing in the world if that person was surfing YouTube. And thought, wait a second, I know these people. And then there we are trashing
They
their
came to
t-shirts.
my church.
Well, see, I said you could trash it a bit more since you didn't get out any specifics, but then right after I said that, you continued to get more specific.
No one will ever
That's
know.
right, that's right. Yeah. What's really bad is that it's recorded, and so you're thinking nobody's listening. There's only 2 people there, or whatever. And then 5 years from now, somebody joins our church. They say, "Yeah, we used to own a T-shirt store," and then they're going to the website, listen to an old podcast, and go, "What? He's talking about us?
Oh,
How awful!"
But again, we haven't been specific enough
That's
to where
true.
you can be like,
Okay.
hey,
That's
you
right.
weren't
I'm not talking about you. What are you talking about? That's crazy. I was encouraged. One of the most encouraging things I got is I did get a message the other day that said that somebody said they were starting from the beginning and going back through all the podcast,
wow.
listening as they were working through their Bible again.
So they're going to hear me back in
Yeah,
and
They're like, oh my goodness, he's right back again.
It was like the 3rd or 4th episode. Something like
Yeah.
That's right.
If they start from the beginning, they're going to hear me, and then when they get to season 3, they're going to be like, oh, that's the same guy.
That's right.
That's what he
Exactly.
looks
And so
like.
it's a sobering thing, though, to remember that people do that they do go back and listen to things that we thought nobody will ever hear that. And then there it is, forever immortalized. Yes. So when Caleb's running for president, they'll be like, "Is this you on this
That's
podcast?"
the guy that
back
did the
May,
Perry the
May
Platypus.
24th.
Yeah.
We quoted you saying something you're going to say later. Not yet. I don't think you've said anything incriminating yet, but just remember that. Remember whatever you're sharing could
That's
hurt
the
your
guy who's
presidential.
part frog who keeps getting bugged to make a
presidential-
T-shirt company.
Presidential.
Yeah. You should
Yeah,
say
I think I might be the
Aspirations.
least likely person here to run for president.
I wouldn't say that.
I would
What?
definitely not say that.
No.
I think so.
That's just you're being humble, but I guarantee that that's not the case.
No, I don't want to.
Oh, yeah. Well,
At all.
I don't either. I
No,
mean, so
But
that
you
sounds
seem
like
like
the
you'd be
worst.
much more likely.
no, that's absolutely not true.
I would hate that.
That is.
But you used to want to be a senator.
Yeah, but I'm not, right?
Yeah.
So
I used to want to
left-
be a
I left
horseback
that.
rider, but
I
look
left
at what
that.
I'm doing now.
I left that path
So,
a long time ago.
Okay, so Caleb, we should be offended. They just sent out a text that the podcast is live for the church, and they capitalized only Jake's name.
All caps on Jake's name.
Yeah, with two
Jake.
exclamation points, and just normal for me and Caleb.
why did
Well,
I
Did
get?
they say it's on YouTube?
I only saw that they only capitalized Jake's name, and I was like, wow.
Troy's isn't capitalized either.
Yeah, but he's the host. Like, everybody knows
And he
he's
has
going
a
to be here.
title. He has a title, pastor.
I run this show now.
Can we
Actually,
Live
go-
now
just
on
kidding,
our
I don't-
Facebook page. No, it says live on our Facebook
That means
page.
that means I have to go to the Facebook page and put something. Yeah.
Could we put like brother Caleb? And
I feel like
brother
at this point we're
So
just going
you're
to advertise for the
saying-
podcast, but
you're
we're never actually going to
saying
start
go
it.
Yeah.
And put.
No, Caleb, we are brothers. Remember the video
Oh yeah.
for the movie night?
Yeah.
No more context is needed. If you know, you know.
I don't know. No, I don't think anyone knows.
Well,
Nope.
I'm Maurice.
I'm Rufus.
Oh, this is more
And
than I
that's-
wanted to know already. I think we're way beyond what I wanted this year.
So about Proverbs.
Yes, quickly change the subject. Jake can.
That's not. Wait. Is that good? Did I do it? Did I do it right?
Yeah, but like what
I don't really watch
what it
shows. So.
yeah, what Josh would usually do was whenever he would get like passionate about a subject, he would just turn towards the camera and like point at it and talk directly at it.
What would Josh do? WWJD.
Maybe that's not a question that all of us need answering. All right, let's clip that and send it to Josh.
That's exactly what I'm planning on doing. Stopping it and sharing it to him.
I'm
that
going
exact.
to
Yeah, delete that
this
one.
Delete it.
part.
It's posted.
There, I did what you said. I put the link to the channel.
Thumbs up.
Dum, bum, bum, bum.
We've got it now.
Ooh, I've got one of those shirts that looks like really weird, kind of.
Oh.
Oh, not no,
Yeah.
it's not when it's little. It's
Yeah, on the wide it's fine.
okay. Never mind.
You know, they make some striped shirts that are specifically for people who like do video thing that won't do that
Yeah.
weird thing.
Gotcha. I don't know any of those.
Yeah, I don't know why you would buy one specifically for that reason unless this was your actual job, I guess. But they're more expensive than I'm sure that shirt was, so.
Wow. That's
That was-
so
yeah, I
hurtful.
know. I
Yeah,
paid
that shirt looks
$500
super
for this
cheap.
shirt.
No, it's not that shirt looks cheap. It's that those other shirts are really expensive.
We got it from that merchant at the pyramids of Egypt.
Yeah.
That's right.
No one knows.
Yeah, this
They're
is
all like,
authentic. This is authentic silver and lapis.
That's
While
right.
his
That's right.
son was riding the camel.
That's right. It's made from some type of silk
They-
somewhere that's really expensive.
They put it on you while you had the bag on your head, and they're like, "All right, $500."
I was with an attorney one time who he was the kind of guy that had like a stuffed cougar in his office, that kind of guy, and he had
Yeah.
a Patagonia hat, and I said, "My boys love Patagonia," and he says, "Isn't the fishing amazing there in the summer?" And I was like, I didn't know it was a place. I was like, they love I meant the shirts.
It's beautiful.
They love the store. But I was like, I guess it is amazing.
Wow.
It's like, wow, people go to Patagonia? That's a thing?
Oh, and mine's all capitalized.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see,
we
Yeah.
already
Wow. Did
established
Suzanne send this
that.
out?
you're special.
I had to give her
I
chocolates.
guess. Yeah, that's right. You should do something special.
Oh.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All
And
right,
then
we're going
me
to
and Caleb
we
will
gotta get- we
sneak
gotta
in
get
and
started
each take like
because
2 of the
we've
chocolates.
successfully spent 50 minutes doing in here.
Yeah.
Let's give it a
We're
shot.
right on track.
We're right on track.
Caleb has to get to Baskin Robbins.
What time do you got to be at Baskin Robbins?
4:30.
Oh, okay. It's like 2 o'clock.
2.
Okay. All right. All right. Do they still have
That's
daiquiri
all,
ice?
folks.
Do they still have daiquiri ice? Is that a
Yeah.
flavor? Because I really like that
It
flavor.
is good.
Mm.
I
Okay.
don't think you're allowed to say daiquiri, because that like usually refers to
Alcohol?
yeah.
I think I'm allowed to say it. I'm
Oh.
not allowed to drink
I don't know if
daiquiri.
you're supposed to.
I think that's the key. I can say beer and bourbon also.
No, Caleb.
I just
my
don't
no.
drink it.
goodness.
I just don't drink it.
Yeah.
Turn this
Caleb.
off.
Yeah.
Stop recording.
Caleb said you're not allowed to, so I think
Okay, yeah,
you know
obviously.
he's
yeah.
the rules lawyer here.
Dun, 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 dun. He's like the dungeon master for
He's
our
definitely like president. Like out of this, I would say out of this table, he's probably the most likely
To be
run for
president. Yeah.
group. Yeah, I absolutely.
I would definitely agree.
All right, here's the thing, Caleb. If we were running right now an election, I think you get more votes at this table than anybody else.
Yeah.
I don't know.
From the
So,
people at this
From
table.
the people at this table, that's right.
That's
One,
dumb
you would be nominated and voted for. Yes.
Yeah.
So without
you
a
wouldn't even
shadow
have
of
to
a doubt.
run or
That's right.
say anything.
That's
You
right.
wouldn't have to campaign. We would just be like, oh yeah, no, Caleb's the
That's right.
president.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Yeah, there you go.
I guess it's
you
official.
went. I used it. I guess. There you go. Boom. 4.
Caleb-
4 out of 4.
Caleb is the president of the
right.
Understanding Jesus podcast.
If you're watching the Understanding Jesus podcast, please vote for Caleb.
Yes.
It's just a write-in ballot.
And if you see
well, you got to be
something,
35. How long until you're 35?
15 years.
15 years. So really 3 presidential cycles or 4 away. Yeah.
but he is still the honorary president of this podcast. So if you have any complaints or anything like that, send them Caleb's way. He'll deal with it in his own time.
Caleb Hitt, 2040 president. 2040, 2040.
That's a long
Sounds terrible.
ways away.
Yeah.
So you got plenty of time to campaign.
I'm
Lots
all right.
of campaign time. 2040.
That's not gonna happen.
Man, I really hope it does now because think how valuable this podcast will be
Yeah.
if that's the case.
See, you wouldn't even really have to campaign that hard. You would just put up a commercial on TV of a clip from the podcast of us 3 voting you as president and see these guys already say I can be president.
Yeah.
So why not you?
Yeah, the only person that I'm going to think of I'm old enough where I have when I was your age, you think of people you talked to and spent time with and people that became famous, well known or whatever. There's very few in the list of people, but a guy that used to work for me at a radio station is now a writer and writes for the Family Guy. He's one of the co-executive producers for Family Guy and also for Only Murders in the Building,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah, the Steve Martin.
Yeah.
One.
He's a executive producer for that as well. So, yeah, but which is kind of weird. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, but it's only weird from the standpoint of it's like having the conversation with Caleb. I mean, he worked for me. It wasn't like
Caleb,
we were like.
could you just look in this camera real quick and say Caleb Hitt approves this message?
It's like.
I don't
and,
want to speak it into existence because I don't have a desire.
That's
for
right.
that.
And he's obviously. I hope
Right.
he's listening.
See how humble he
because
is, guys.
So wonderful.
I hope for some reason accidentally he tunes in because it's like he went off the reservation and it's like, man, come home, come back to us. Anyway, not that writing for Family Guy makes you necessarily that, but it
Yeah,
does.
but I would be disappointed if he's written some of the jokes that I've seen on Family Guy.
Yeah, yes, and that would probably be true. Yes, yeah, but anyway, he was going into ministry at one point, so it happens. Yeah, so that's the kind of job I did. I scared him so bad for ministry.
Are you speaking into my future?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Why did you leave the ministry? A guy named Troy Richards.
Jake, you better catch up on The Simpsons and Family Guy
I
and
guess so.
all those Fox cartoons.
Yeah.
I probably won't do that.
Just run through the
Probably-
Adult Swim
probably not.
library and start picking a job.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, we're ready. You want to go first?
Sure.
So we'll start, and then we'll go Jake, and then Caleb, and then me, and then we'll go back around one more time. So you have kind of some time to figure out what you're going to do.
Okay.
So just don't say what Jake says. That's really all you have to do.
I'll try not to.
And
I might just repeat it.
I'll run around. And,
Yeah.
and avoid-
Make a mental note of everything Jake says and say it back verbatim.
That would be so awesome if you
Alright.
did that, though.
That'd be impressive, actually.
It would be super impressive.
Wow, Caleb, that's very impressive.
So, I was going to read from Proverbs.
We haven't started yet.
I'll tell you when I told you I'll tell you. You'll hear
Yeah,
me say,
I'm sorry. I've been here for 2.5 hours.
oh my gosh, welcome to my life. I'm here forever.
I always give a 3, 2, 1 at the
Yeah,
before we
and then I'm
start
the first
recording.
person to speak.
3.
It's my show.
My name was capitalized.
That's right. That legally makes him in charge.
All right. Okay.
All right.
0.
So what I always do is I stop mine from recording because I don't speak.
Okay. I like the fact that you put a space bar button on the Stream Deck, because it's like instead of having to do this, I can do this.
Well, it makes less noise.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
And,
very good.
Like that'll be just the pause button for
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
so and then just part. So,
Okay.
3, 2, 1.
We are back at the Understanding Jesus podcast, and we are going to take a moment to share what we learned in our Bible reading this week. Some amazing passages that stood out to anytime you're in 2 Samuel and the Gospel of John, Psalms and Proverbs are always good, but the Gospel of John and 2 Samuel there are no boring chapters in those sections. So Jake, if you come up with something boring, then
That's my only goal at this point, is to find something boring. in
You've
2
thrown
Samuel.
off my whole thesis here. So anyway, what share with us what stood out to you this week?
Well, I was going to start in Proverbs 16, and this is verses 1 through 9. The plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit. Commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. The Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. Everyone who is arrogant in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Be assured he will not go unpunished. By steadfast love and faithfulness, iniquity is atoned for, and by the fear of the Lord one turns away from evil. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps. All of Proverbs, I mean, you could spend your whole life in just Proverbs and always find new things. But for me, I really thought that this was a beautiful just section of Scripture talking about the plans of man's heart and how really everything we do is wicked and deceitful, prideful, and that God's plans are always sovereign. And as a person that's just graduated college, there's a lot of that ambiguity of life of what is happening. And it's always easy to just do what you want to do and to not take time to really think about what is the Word of God saying about what we're called to do and how have other people failed, to follow in what we're called. So I thought that was kind of one of the sections of all of the things that really stuck out to me, and that kind of goes with what I'll talk about a little bit later with 2 Samuel.
Very good. Yeah, I do think that, a lot of times when we read Proverbs, usually 1 verse, 2 verses is sufficient. I'm glad you read through that whole section because it really does it demonstrates how God knows our heart, and we do not know our heart. I think that's, our hearts are deceitful. And that's one thing that comes out in Proverbs over and over again is how deceitful our human hearts are. We get this idea in our minds that I think we've figured ourselves out. And we'll say things like, I know him, he's a good person. And it's usually, but then you also watch the news and it's like this serial killer, and they talk to his neighbors like, we always thought he was a really good guy. I always thought these wonderful things about him. And we're kind of shocked that nobody goes, yeah, he was a serial killer all the way. Yeah, even his mom's like, yeah, I always knew he was going to be a serial killer. But that's because we are deceived. We look at things that we kind of mask what's really going on inside of us, even to ourselves. We kind of don't look at dark places in us, but God, he knows what's in our hearts. And so when he says our hearts are bad, he knows what he's talking about, which is the reason why we need a new heart. And I think it always sets the stage for the gospel. I think when we read through anything, especially Proverbs in the Old Testament, because you should get to a point where you're like, I'm not a good person. And it should make us desire, or make us, we always need to realize our need for a Savior. So it should always drive us to the gospel. Thanks. Thank you, Jake.
You're so welcome.
I'm so glad
Jake.
I'm so glad you're here today. That's right. All right. And Caleb is here after taking 2 years off and not one. He boycotted the podcast for a long period of time.
Yeah, I only read the Bible once every other year.
So he said, when you get back to the part I've read, then invite me back again.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. What stood out to you, Caleb?
I'm also going to be sticking in Proverbs. So,
okay.
Sorry. But a little bit later, in the chapter in 16, verses 18 through 23 is where I'll be sticking around. And it starts by saying, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. It is better to be of a lowly spirit with the poor than to divide the spoil with the proud. Whoever gives thought to the word will discover good, and blessed is he who trusts in the Lord." So that verse 18 about just like pride goes before destruction, like every time. We always hear and talk about pride as being one of the 3 like root sins, and I think this is a good illustration of that before destruction comes, before sin comes, pride is already present. And that is kind of what sets the rest of that off. And then in that verse 20, it kind of says how you can combat that and counter that. Whoever gives thought to the word will discover good, and blessed is he who trusts in the Lord, because that is the opposite of being prideful. Giving thought to the word, focusing on that, and basing everything you do off of that will lead to good, where otherwise you'll just be leading to destruction.
Good stuff. Yeah. I'm going to look at John chapter 5. And in John chapter 5, you have this Jesus healing this person, and there's a pool that's there where people wait. The story is that the angel would come along and stir it, and then the first one into the pool would be healed. And so Jesus sees this man who's been waiting here, and he heals the man. And then he takes up his bed and leaves. And then the Pharisees confront him because they're like, "Why are you carrying your bed on the Sabbath day?" And then so he has this encounter with them. It kind of sounds like, or kind of looks like, that the guy is saying, "Hey, I'm not at fault here. It was Jesus's fault for telling me to do this." And so kind of throwing the blame there. And in John chapter 5, verse 14, it says, "Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, 'See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you.'" And this, it kind of goes back and forth. Some people wonder if Jesus was kind of like tongue in cheek, kind of like the Pharisees. Don't be like them. Obviously, they're a bunch of whatever. And they, but the other thought is that Jesus was saying, "Hey, you need to be careful, because if you are, even though you've been made well, but now you're at a critical point of deciding which direction you're going to go." And the reason why I lean in that is because of what he says later in verse 22. He says, "For the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son, that all should honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him." And whether or not, always remembering that John is writing this for us, for the church, and is sharing this story for a reason. And it's actually very, that makes the warning of Jesus very jarring. It's like it's like when you pray and say, God, if you'll heal me, get me out of this situation, fix my car, lower my taxes, find me that job, help me find a wife, whatever the prayer is, we then make a deal. Like, then I will serve you, or I'll be faithful to you, or I'll honor you, and whatever. And then we get that which we are seeking, and it's like, I'm not really as interested in, and now I got other plans. I got things I wanted to do. I'll get to that later. That's where that warning. This is where that warning comes in. He's like, look, when I answer prayers, I do that for everybody. It rains on the just and the unjust. I bring blessing into people's lives, but the blessing doesn't mean anything if you don't get the message behind it, that I am the one who has the power to bless you eternally, or the power to judge you, and you being made well or improving your life in this world is so momentary. It's just like that's such a small thing. And we are. There's this video that goes around. It's kind of a viral thing, but it's like a guy who's pulling sheep out of a ditch. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but I'll send it to you then when I get the opportunity. But anyway, he's like this ditch. I think it's like a 2-foot wide little trench, and the sheep is inside of it, and it's got this guy who's pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. And he finally wrestles the sheep out of it. And the sheep bounces up, and he takes off running, and then jumps, and it falls right back in. And it's like, there we are. That is us in a nutshell. It's such a great illustration for us that we get stuck in a place, and all we can think of is, I just want to get free. I just want to get free. I just want to get free. And then we're set free, and then we go right back into the same ditch that we got out of. And Jesus is, it's remembering this is not about us having a better life here.
Right.
It's about understanding that this life is not what life is about, that Jesus is offering another life, and that is where our focus needs to be. And in order to focus on that, we shouldn't focus on this life at all. We should focus on him, which is why he says that when he says things like, you deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me, that's us recognizing, I don't really need this life. In fact, everything about this life is going to lead to something bad, so I just need to forsake this life and embrace the life that Jesus has for me.
I know that the verse that's like, do you want to be healed, or do you want to be made well, in other translations, when I was younger, I was like, why would you not? I was like, literally, like, of course you want to be healed. You can't, all the stuff. And then just that whole idea of, well, once that happens, you have to make this critical decision that's like, you can't stay where you are anymore.
Right.
And I think people in general forget that too nowadays. Because you say that you're a Christian, and then you keep kind of just doing what you're doing, and there's not really a difference. And I know that this isn't necessarily saying that exactly, but I think it's a good illustration.
But he says it elsewhere. He says, there was a place where a demon was, and the demon was cast out, and then the house was swept clean and put in order, and then 7 more come back where where there was previously one, and he said, so the state of the man at the end was worse than the beginning, and it's like that's kind of what you're looking at. Is if you once you've been made well, once I've cleaned everything up, now if you don't fill your life with the Spirit of God, then evil is going to come back, and it's going to be worse for you in the end than it is right now. So, right. Back to you, Jake.
Okay, I'm moving on to 2 Samuel, and one of the things, as you see, and a little bit that's kind of interesting to me, just this whole narrative with David, and after his escape with Saul and all of the drama of the previous books. It's so interesting to me when they get to this part, when at the very, very beginning of the book, after all of this word is spread that their people were killed, and that Saul is dead, there was just this weeping. And I know that Jonathan died too, and so it wasn't necessarily he was just lamenting over Saul, but when you think of these enemies that are dying, your first thought is not, like, I'm so sad for them. At least mine is not, and maybe that's just because I'm a horrible person. But You don't have to agree.
I
I
was
saw that.
careful. I was careful. Yeah.
So kind of through that, after all those battles, 2 Samuel chapter 10, verses 9 through 13 is kind of what I'm focusing on. And it says, when Joab saw that the battle was set against him, both in front and in the rear, he chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of his men he put in the charges of Abishai his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. And he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. So I know that you have to be careful when you read scriptures that it's not just because you see it, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily about you, because
Right.
that's not what
'Cause
scripture is
It's
for.
not about you.
That's not what it's for. But what is interesting to me is that same idea of their courage and saying it's whatever seems good to God. And it has nothing to do, like, we know that he's going to win this battle. We know that we're not going to be hurt. He's simply saying, this is what we're doing. We're going to do our best to make sure that we're doing what God has entrusted us with. But ultimately, we're just trusting in him to take care of things and follow his plan, because we know that he's going to follow his plan. And that really goes with exactly what that proverb said as well, where, my ways are failures, and I can't see all things, recognizing that God is all-knowing and his plan is ultimately sovereign. And just remembering, all the battles and the things that he had brought them out of already. And
Right.
instead of just like, oh, well, he got us out of that, but this is a new thing, so let's worry about this. And really remembering what God had done for them.
Very good. Yeah. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just going to let that lay. Let that stay there.
Yeah, and I think with that, a lot of times we kind of just assume that we know what like God's best is, like what would be best based on like past experiences, like you were saying, like we would assume like, oh, God's gonna get me through this battle, this struggle, because that would be best. But in reality, the best thing could be for us to go through it and to suffer and like experience like trials and tragedy through that.
And Joshua had that when the angel of the Lord came and Joshua was going into the battle, and he's like, are you on their side or are you on our side? And the angel of the Lord was kind of like, I'm not on anybody's side. And I remember a preacher one time would say, he said, when God shows up, he doesn't take sides, he comes to take over. And that's, it's always important to remember that this is not, that he isn't in any battle on our side. He's does what he does. He says, you need to be on my side. And that's what you're trying to look at. And we've talked about experiencing God before. One of the things Henry Blackaby points out in Experiencing God is that that's why we look and see what God is doing, and we join him in the work that he's doing, not try to get him to come and bless the work that we are doing, because our work doesn't mean anything. We're really trying to figure out what God's doing. Yeah. Cool. Very good. All right, Caleb, your turn again.
All right. I'm gonna spend some time in John chapter 4, with the woman at the well. So it's a pretty well-known passage.
No pun intended. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah. Nice. But whenever I was reading this, I realized that this might be common knowledge for some people, but I did not know how a well actually worked. And so I looked it up on Google like you do, and so you might already know this, but like, so you just drill a hole and there's water underground, and then you just send down a bucket and you pick it up and it's there. But like the more you use it, the deeper you have to drill so that you can keep getting water, because it doesn't replenish. I mean, it depends how much you're using the well. The more you use it,
right,
the less time it has to replenish. But whenever Jesus is saying that, he has this well and like it never runs dry, he like provides this eternal satisfaction. Like it doesn't have to take time to replenish. Like his word is sufficient for forever, and for all people. So that like seeing that like analogy, that was like the first time I really thought about it like that. It
Yeah.
was kind of cool.
Because you've been
to think about.
spoiled by running water is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is good.
I didn't have to know how a well worked, but now I do.
Yeah.
And then one other part that I found interesting was, so in verse 25, it says that the Samaritan woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. And when he comes, he will tell us all things. And Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he.
Mm.
But a little bit before that, Jesus was telling this woman, like, he knew everything about her.
Mhm.
He, like, was aware of the sin in her life and all these things. And I mean, it showed a lot about like the modern Christian, how it's the exact same thing. We have a bunch of sin in our life, and we're thinking like, well, I know that Christ is going to come one day, but he's not like here right now. So it makes us feel like we don't have to fix those things in our life. But yeah, this woman knew that a Messiah was coming,
Mm.
but she was just going to wait, and let all that other stuff in her life just kind of sit and still be present.
Yeah. It is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, because it is one of the greatest examples of evangelism we have, and Jesus doing it himself, which is just great because he purposefully goes to a place that he wouldn't normally go,
Mhm.
and to a land that is that a lot of Jewish people wouldn't travel to in Samaria. And then you have this woman who breaks all the code that he has to follow, and the disciples are going to get food, and Jesus doesn't go to get food, and then uses that to show that that we are more than food, and that showed that that the bread of life really is about doing the will of God. But seeing into this woman's life, and then she becomes an evangelist. I mean, she's converted, and then goes and shares what happens to her with the other people, and then they are come to Christ, and then they come, and then they say, now we don't just know because of what you told us, we know because we've experienced ourselves. Which so much is happening, and all of that is what is duplicated over and over again when we share the gospel with people. Our hope is that they grow beyond that which we have shared, and then come and experience it for themselves. And now they know because of their own connection to Christ, not just because of the things we say to them. But the thing that you have this woman who is believing, and this goes all the way back to when the kingdom was divided, and you had when people followed Jeroboam, he instituted a new holy site. And so you had Solomon's temple, who the people of Israel are no longer coming back to, and they have their own sacrificial system, and they really warp and distort all the all the law, and come up with new ways of understanding priests and so forth, and that just carries over as the tribes are lost, and when they go into Assyria. And the Assyrians forced them to intermarry to kind of destroy their culture and so forth. And so that's why they were not respected by the Jewish people, because the Jewish people had tried to maintain their bloodlines, whereas the Northern Kingdom did not. And so created another, like I said, a perversion of Judaism. So she's basically saying, yeah, you guys do what you do, we do what we do, and whatever. But yet she's not even following by anywhere near the close practice. She is even looked down upon with our own people, and this is such an evangelical encounter that we have. It's like when you knock on somebody's door and say, "Hey, I'm from the Baptist church." They go, "Well, I'm Methodist, so whatever," And even though they haven't been in the Methodist church in like 50 years, that they say that because they're like, "Yeah, you're different, so whatever," and it shows you that people don't need a Baptist church. They don't need the Methodist church to come back and say, "Oh, you said you're a Methodist." What they need is they need Jesus. And so Jesus is saying, "Hey, I am bringing something that is not from my tradition. It's not from your tradition. I'm bringing a whole new way of worship in." And the crazy part is 2,000 years later, that's still the conversation we're having. This isn't about your traditional worship practice. This isn't about my traditional worship practice. This is about discovering Jesus and you for the first time, and how amazing he is and awesome and so forth. And it's such a, and it changes her. And I mean, to the point where she has this awful life. And she goes, her eyes are open and she sees something, and the disciples miss it. They're so clueless, and which tells me that's kind of me. That's where I fit in the story. I'm the clueless one over to the side. But then she empowered goes and shares herself, which is just so liberating for women, And I mean, what a great story for women in the Bible, and just and showing that this is that Jesus. That's what Jesus does. He liberates people, he sets them free, and empowers them with the power of the gospel to share the good news of Jesus Christ. And I just, yeah, it circumvents all the stuff we bring in to hinder people from coming to know Christ. So that's a great passage. I'm glad you took it, but I hijacked it a little bit there for you. I want to close out with something from 2 Samuel chapter 7. It says, "Now therefore, thus shall you say to my servant David," this is God talking to the prophet Nathan, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the sheepfold, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. And I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you, and have made you a great name, like the name of the great men who are on the earth. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more, nor shall the sons of wickedness oppress them any more, as previously, since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused you to rest from all your enemies. Also the Lord tells you that he will make you a house. When your days are fulfilled, and you rest with your fathers, I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom." Now, it's a reminder to David. David was wanting to build a place for the ark. He wanted to build a temple. And God comes to him and says, "You're wanting to establish a place for me." He says, "But you understand, you don't establish me. I establish you. I still see you as you are. You think you've become, you're this king now, and you got all these people around you who basically worship you, and who do everything you say and so forth, and you're trying to do something good for me. But the reality is, I don't need you to do something good for me. I do all good for you." This happens when we get affluence or money or whatever. We go from being a person who has to beg God for, it's like, it reminds me when I was in college, you're praying, "God, please just give me change to buy graham crackers or something to eat, for to have some tuna fish or something, a can of tuna fish." And then you get to a place where you first start making money and so forth. And then you're like, you know what? I'm going to give something to God. I'm going to give God a little something, to really bless him and do something amazing. And it's like God's going, "Oh, wow, thank goodness you're making money now. Now I'm going to be okay." It's like God in heaven going, "Finally, the church can do something, because now you're tithing." And as if he needs our resources or whatever. I remember a guy who would give a gift to our church every year of several $1,000s. He never went to church. He never came to worship or whatever. But it was like, "Hey, just to buy my way into heaven, I'm going to give a few $1,000s to you." As if God was going, "Whew, so glad he came through, because wow, what would we do without that?" It's like when people say, "If I won the lottery, I will tithe it." As if God's going, "Okay, that excuses your desire to gamble. So because if you'll give me a cut, then I'm all in." And we don't remember, God doesn't need our money. He doesn't need anything from us. He doesn't need, no resources. Never mistake any preacher who acts like he needs something and wants you to give a little bit of money. He may need money, but God doesn't need any money or resources in order to do what he does. And the world has it so upside down. But we do that. We all twist it upside down. We all get into this mindset that we are helping God out, as if I'm saying, like if you say, "Well, we need an evangelism campaign," it's like, I guess on maybe a Saturday I can give that and do something as if God is in heaven going, whoa, please, would you do that for me? Because that would be really so helpful if you give me one Saturday out of the year to really help. Keith Green used to say that, he'd always say that, people come say, I'm coming. I'm glad I can some Sundays and Wednesdays. And Keith Green would say, well, and God's answer is, if you can't come to me every day, don't bother coming at all. And people be like, what do you mean by that? We don't say that to people, because what if they don't come at all? As if God is in heaven going, wow, if people stop coming to church, how am I going to get all this done? And the reality is, hear me. This is what he's saying to David. I don't need you. I don't need anything from you. I don't need you to establish me. I establish you. I'm the one. Are you forgetting that air you're breathing? I provide that air. The earth that you are enjoying, I am providing that earth. I am the one who is made. You are nothing. You can't. All the work that you accomplish and so forth. And it's like, well, what about the iPhone? I was like, there's no iPhone. My grandson said that the other day. He's like, and he's 9. And he gets this. He said, he's looking at the buildings and so forth. He was saying, God made all the buildings, and I think my wife said something like, well, God made the nature or whatever, but men build buildings, but God makes mountains and so forth. And my grandson was like, yeah, but God makes the men who makes the buildings. He gives them the ability to make the buildings. And it's like, wow, it's very insightful, because that's true. It's like, we don't have it's good talents, skills, abilities. Those all come from God too. And that's really what he's saying. He's saying that that unless he desires, the cures to diseases, medications, all the things that people come up with, God is the one who ordains that. He's the one who made you, gave you your brain, gave you your ability, this insight and so forth. And when we get proud of ourselves, he just has to pull back just a little bit. I look at the coronavirus and I think, look at how everybody just fell apart dramatically. Like, what do we do? What do we do? We're running around crazy. Like, how do we respond? And making tons of mistakes and so forth. And it's just God going, you were getting a little bit confident there. You're a little bit cocky in your own abilities and so forth, and that's just like a little push in that direction. And you want people to say, what if we had a new coronavirus every day, all over the world, all the time? It's like, well, we couldn't make it. We couldn't survive. And that's what that's what God is trying to say to us. You're right. You can't survive unless I keep these things at bay, unless I sustain this order. And you are thinking that you have the ability to protect yourselves and keep all these things, but no, you don't have the ability. And you should be afraid. You should be terrified of what death can do and what the world falling apart and all these different destructions that can come upon you. You should be terrified all the time. And and then seek me. That should be the response to that. But the reality is back in David's day and in our day too, that people don't turn to the Lord. They turn everywhere else but the Lord. But that's why the church has a message. So we still have a very relevant message, and the message is that there's hope in Christ. That at some point God is going to lift off his hand, and he's going to let the world implode, and he's going to let the world destroy itself. And when it does, then it's like you better know the way out of this world. Have a ticket on that lifeboat. Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys very much for sharing. We're going to come back and do some questions here in just a bit. So stay with us. If we had sponsors, they would be right in the spot right now, but nobody sponsors us.
Custom Cuts and Crafts.
That's right. That's right. And now word from Custom Cuts and Crafts.
Word.
You all need a jingle.
That's right. Now, this is where we have speculated, and we are thinking about it. This is where we want to put in, like our flapjack thing or whatever, create an audio version.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I think my daughter's creativity has no audio. There's actually no voice in that. It's just all text, and that's apparently a generational thing, because it's like somebody needs to speak. But
it should be Jake.
Do what?
I think it should be Jake.
Jake should be the flapjack guy.
Because Jake is
Flapjakes.
is close to Jake. Jake and Jack.
Yeah.
Flapjakes.
Flapjakes.
That
There you
sounds
go.
like a fellowship that no one would want to go to.
Yeah. Yes. Well, not
Probably
necessarily.
Not a great
So-
idea.
So, have you got a question?
Yes. Are we
No, you're telling me the question, and we're gonna.
okay?
Again,
Just
The
one.
podcast has paused.
there's a 3, 2, 1, and then
Okay.
yeah.
But then people are not watching.
This is the
But
podcast.
could
No, it is
watch.
live stream. They
Yeah.
can
They could
see
watch.
that.
They are
can see
watching
this.
live. It won't be in the edited version that's on Facebook or the edited audio version that's on the podcast platforms.
Yeah.
But it is live right now on YouTube.
Clear as mud. Okay. So my first question was through the beginning. Well, really through almost the first half of the Gospel of John. He uses a lot of figurative language.
Mhm.
Well, John writes with a lot of figurative language in general.
Okay.
But specifically, what I was looking at was like in regards to food. With let me find it here. There's several spots where he talks about drinking living water, eating the bread of life, and then the big one, and this is really where my question comes, which I have heard answers, but I'm just curious for your thoughts when
Mhm.
he talks about unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you.
Mm.
So
And
On
what's the chapter? On
that is that specific verse is John chapter 6, verse 53.
Okay.
And I think my biggest thing is that, like, you would think that all of the food, I mean, obviously they didn't have the luxuries that we have now,
Mhm.
and
They
so
didn't have flapjacks?
they probably did not have flapjacks or flapjakes, and so they probably would have been hungry at most of the times that Jesus was speaking to them. And so, I mean, it would make sense. I mean, we're Baptists after all, so we have food at pretty much everything we do too.
Mhm.
But it makes you think that he's not trying to say this to entice big numbers, because it's not super encouraging when you have some guy that's saying that he wants you to eat him and drink his blood.
Right.
So,
Yes. I love that. Okay. We can do that. Can you get that question in like a shorter
yes, absolutely.
version? Okay. Do you have any questions?
I did not come prepared with it.
Do you have any questions with that you aren't prepared to share? You're just getting questions in general?
Better start racking your brain. You're not allowed to go to Baskin Robbins until you give us a question to answer.
Stupid. Want some ice cream.
Well, then you better get on Caleb for hurrying up and
Wait,
asking a
Do you want me
question.
to give you a question?
Sure.
Give him a question. Yeah. Yeah, because if you don't, I'll come up with some.
It counts. As long as Caleb vocally asks the question, then it counts.
Well, I had another one that I wrote down, which is kind of vague, maybe, but I talked about in the Psalms for this week, and even the beginning of 2 Samuel were really all laments
Mm-hmm.
and just cries out to God. And so I was kind of thinking about, I feel like that's a thing that we don't really do anymore.
It's
Like,
lament.
we still ask for stuff, but
Mhm.
we don't really lament to God for help
Yeah.
with
that's,
things. If that's not worded super great, but
that's more of a commentary than a question, but
it's just I don't know. It's interesting to me on is that a cultural thing for them? Like, is that still a thing for them? Is that
does
if that makes sense? Like, why have we gotten away from that? It's kind of, it's not super like based out of like any specific part, but
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Do you want to ask that question, Caleb, or do you want your own?
it's not a very good question. So you can find your own.
I'm trying to find.
That's-
It is a genuine question.
Yes.
It's not.
A question with a clear question mark at the end would be preferable.
Would it be a like
Oh, I saw your text.
Yeah.
That is so sweet.
fair
You sneezed and I couldn't say
question to
anything,
ask
so I was,
about like
So
the
I just texted to
timeline
you.
of Second
So
Samuel?
sweet.
Do you want to say it again?
Like
I
the
try.
timeline of Second Samuel, because in chapter 5, there's a section where it's talking about David defeating the Philistines,
Mm-hmm.
and then in chapter 8, at the start, it says after this, David defeated the Philistines.
Okay.
I don't know everything in between because I didn't read all of the Second Samuel passages
Gotcha.
for this week,
Right.
but I didn't know if that would be like a fair question or if by reading
That's a good
that
question.
it would
No,
just
no.
make sense.
No, that's good. No, there is a question, and I don't know if it is next week's reading or not, but we can go over the timeline. Yeah.
For a second, when you started that statement, I thought you were going to say, there are such things as dumb questions, but that was not one of them, so good job, Caleb.
Yeah. Say it. Tell me the chapters again, though.
Chapter 5 and
Okay.
chapter 8.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Like, will you have material to answer that? Like,
Yeah. That's not.
And if you're watching at home, see how long it took us to ask questions? Maybe if you have a question, you can leave it down in the comments, and then we
Yeah.
can answer those questions.
Absolutely. Yeah. For sure.
You'll even get a shout out. We can say who asked the question.
We can publicly shame you.
Yeah. Well, they can ask it anonymously, but if you'd like a shout out, just ask a question, and then we'll say your name, and we'll answer your question. So that's like a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah.
Speaking of 2-for-1 deals, custom. What is it called?
Yeah.
Caleb,
There's
what's
a-
that name of the t-shirt company that you haven't made yet, but we keep bugging you to make?
Jake's idea for it was custom cuts and craft.
Custom
Wow.
Cuts and Crafts.
Such a good idea, Jake. I'm glad you gave
Brought
that to
you
Caleb.
by Custom Cuts and Crafts.
President Hitt.
All right, you ready? Can you ask that question? Can you formulate it and can you put it in the form of a question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Jeopardy answers only.
All right. Okay, let's do it. We are now entering into our question and answer segment of the Understanding Jesus podcast. And so, Jake, we will let you go first.
All right. So my question comes from the Gospel of John. Through John, he writes several things about living water and eating the bread of life. And
Right.
my question is coming from chapter 6.
Mhm.
And it is verse 53. So Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you." So, can you talk about why Jesus would have worded it this way and what kind of effect that would have had on the Jewish people at that time?
Yeah, there were several times Jesus would say things like this where it would frustrate the disciples a little bit because they're like, "Why are you talking like this? This is making it more difficult for people to be connected to you." And but there's multiple things that are going on when he's making these statements of "I am the bread of life," "I am the living water." We call those the "I am" statements in John and the Gospel of John. There are 7 significant "I am" statements, but he makes multiple, makes more than that. But we call them the "I am" statements because there are moments where he clearly references himself as Yahweh, that's where the word "I am." The name for God comes in the Old Testament from where he says to Moses, when people ask who sent me and who God is and what's his name, what am I to tell them? And God says, "I am that I am." Well, the word for that is Yahweh, and really just the letters YHWH. We don't have the vowels, and they think that in Hebrew they took out the vowels so that people could not enunciate it. Today we do. but and so they would have Adonai, which would mean the Lord, and so forth. So they had a word to describe God, but then they had this name for God that could not be spoken, and so being the good Gentile I am, we say Yahweh all the time, but Jesus then takes this and inserts it into, like I said, these I am statements that Jewish people would clearly see. He's saying that he is God. In fact, all the way up until when he's arrested, and then he and then he's there's a point where he's saying before Abraham was, I am, and which is a clear thing. But then when they come to him, they said, where's Jesus and who is Jesus? And he says, I am, and they all fall backwards and so forth, and him uttering this. And so the force of him just proclaiming himself to be God. Anyway, all these things of him saying, like I said, I am the bread of life and so forth. He's saying, I am God. And then to say that if you don't eat my flesh, drink my blood, basically saying if you don't have meat inside of you, then you are not going to be changed. You are not made new. That I am the food that you're looking for. When he has that encounter, which we talked about earlier, with a Samaritan woman, and saying that what you really need is you need living water. And she's like, well, you don't even have a bucket. How are you going to provide me living water? And he's basically saying, I am the water that you're looking for. And when the disciples come and say, do you need some food? And he says, I have food that you don't know of. Basically trying to get people to understand what makes us alive is not the physical bread that we are eating, not the physical drink that we are drinking, but it is the Spirit of God that sustains us, that makes us new. When we take of communion, we are remembering, when we partake of the bread, that it's not the bread that keeps us alive, and especially if you're eating those little tiny squares of wafers, you surely know that you can't be sustained by that for very long. And drink this little shot glass of juice. When you do that, you're remembering, it is not bread that keeps me alive. It is not the fruit of the vine that keeps me from being thirsty, but it is Jesus himself. I remember that Jesus is the source of my sustenance, that he is who makes me alive and keeps me. And so that and the idea of ingesting that, getting that deep into my bowels, is internalizing that truth, and that is what keeps me alive. Jesus would use language like this to trip people up, to make them see how you are focused on material. You are focused on what is in front of you. And remember when he was in the boat with his disciples, and he'd say the leaven of the Pharisees and so forth. And when he said that, he must be talking about the fact that we were talking about bread. And he's like, are you still not getting it? I fed the 5,000. I fed the 4,000. And you're still you're still thinking of food. It reminds me of the Hobbits. I'm so glad. Have you read the Lord of the Rings?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm so used to Josh Humphreys. Josh, if you're listening, man, we're not glad that you're gone.
We've
But
roasted him so much today.
but it is one of those things that every time we make a Lord of the Rings reference, he goes, we'll look like, oh, here's another one. But the hobbits, when they're walking through the wilderness and with Aragorn, and all they can think about is, when are we going to eat again? Is it time for lunch or second breakfast? Yeah, exactly. 11sies, exactly. And so and that's us. That's us. We're all we think of as when's our next meal coming? When are we going to eat again? And Jesus is constantly trying to show, do you not get it? That for all eternity, I'm the one who sustains you. You don't have to. He's showing that everything. And then the Old Testament, that's where manna, and he connects that with manna. That the manna in the wilderness is God just saying, I can't eat. All this comes from me. It's like, how are we going to eat if we don't have food to grow, and have crops and all these different things? And God's like, I'm the one who provides all of this all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's where he's saying with this, that unless you learn that I am the one who sustains you, literally meaning the word I am, then you're lost. You don't understand it. I make this illustration all the time about worry, because it's like, nobody ever says, I am so worried about where I'm going to live after I die. Or nobody comes to me and says, Pastor, I'm really stressed out. After I die, I don't know how I'm going to eat. I don't know where I'm going to get food. I'm not going to have any money. I'm obviously, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for a living after I'm dead? Nobody ever comes to those questions. And if you ask them, say, why aren't you concerned about that? They go, oh, well, God is going to provide all that. It's like, well, what God are you talking about? The same God we were talking about today? Is he going to change? Does he have a different bank account? Does he have a different well to draw from after you're dead? It's like that same God who you're thinking is going to take care of everything then. He's the same God who takes care of you today.
Yeah.
And so that's why we are not to be worried. So anyway, I had a long answer. Always a long answer to a short question, but anyway, appreciate the answer. Appreciate the question. Yeah. Caleb, let's give you a chance to ask a question before we go.
All right. So I was wondering if you could kind of break down the timeline in 2 Samuel just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In the second half of chapter 5, it's talking about David defeating the Philistines. And then just a couple chapters later in chapter 8, right at the start, it says, after this, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them.
Mm.
So it kind of seems like it is like repeating itself, but the order of everything I found to be a little confusing.
Yeah, and I'm going to take your question and add a question to it that actually is in next week's reading, but you should have already read it if you're there. And that's when Absalom leaves and kills his brother, and then is forced out and comes back. In some versions, King James version included, it says that 40 years later, that he comes back or whatever, and it's like, well, Absalom's not even 40 years old, and it's like, so what all has transpired, and it throws and things like that will throw the timeline off. And some people say, well, I think it was a clerical error that it should have been 4 years later instead of 40 years, because the words are pretty close, and I tend to agree with that it should be 4 years instead of 40. But people who really like to stick with especially King James version, will say, obviously that can't be wrong. So it has to be 40, and they'll say, well, he's talking about before David's, when David was anointed, and so it's 40 years from the time David was anointed. The timeline is difficult because we know this. We know David, when he was put in as king in Hebron, he was there for 7.5 years, and then he was made king over all Judah, and then did that for 33 years, and so his kingdom total was 40 years. So we know that. We know he was probably 30 when he became king, and so he was probably died when he was 70. That's it. How old he was when he defeated Goliath, we don't know. There was no time given for that. He was mad. He went and stayed amongst the Philistines and so forth. But what you're talking about is more of just a reminder that those were two separate things. The defeating of the Philistines never actually fully happened. It was an ongoing enemy of Israel, and so when he subdued people, it was more like he defeated them to a point where he was bringing them into submission. But here's something interesting, because they defeated the Philistines at the beginning of when he slew Goliath, and that was it's kind of like when they said David has killed Saul has killed his thousands and David has slain his tens of thousands, and Saul got all jealous and everything. It was actually all part of that same battle encounter, and the reason is because when you would go as a king to fight against, it's a big deal. You would get all your soldiers together. I mean, you're talking about amassing your soldiers and then going out to battle, and then you would set up camp, and you're there for a very long time of setting up camp. So he was there for a very long time. David had already been anointed by Samuel to be king, and then as kind of a side gig, he was playing music to kind of calm Saul down. Saul would have these fits of temper. They found David to play music for him, and so he's doing that. And then he'd go back and take care of the sheep some, and then he'd go back And so he was in this kind of interim thing, which is kind of weird because when he kills Goliath, Saul kind of acts like, I don't know who he is, but he did already know him, but he didn't know him. I guess he's like, whose son is he? And all these different things. But so David, there's a lot of things that you kind of have to read this, realize we're bouncing back and forth in the story. But it did start with him being anointed. He came, and the brothers of David were the ones that Samuel thought he was going to anoint. But that introduces David into the story, and then also remember that as this is being written, everybody knows that David's the king, and he's a great king, and we're telling his story, and so we're making references to things from the perspective of, it's not like they don't know who he's going to become when they're writing about David killing Goliath. They know who he is. And this is a story that's been told 1 billion times. And so we're just writing down details of it and so forth. But so that it's kind of like when you already know the ending of a story and you're telling the story, it doesn't read the same as if it's all just being unfolded. So you got David, destroyed the Philistines, but kind of how that unfolds is David slays Goliath, and has this incredible battle, and so David becomes this warrior that's known and then legendary at the very beginning, and so Saul makes him a commander, and sends him out, and David is very successful. Saul's actually doing it, trying to get him killed, and David doesn't get killed. He keeps winning. In fact, he sends him out for foreskins and thinking that'll, asks for the hand of my wife, to make his daughter his wife. And David winds up doing twice as much as, and showing how valiant he is. Again, these are stories being told of people who already know who David's going to become. When David defects from Saul and goes to be with the Philistines, something very interesting is taking place that we just get from archaeology. The reason why the Philistines, sometimes we get in our head that you have the nation of Israel as being the strong army and the Philistines as being kind of a smaller army. I don't know if you get that picture in your head or not, but that is completely the opposite. The Philistines are the mighty army, and think of the Iron Age. They have weapons and armor and so forth. They have blacksmiths. If you read in the text, it says that if you had plowshares and so forth, you had to go to the Philistines to get those plows made, because the Israelites didn't have that technology. If you want to think of it in more contemporary terms, the Philistines are the Americans, and the Israelites are the Native Americans. This is why it's such a big deal. The only suit of armor they had was the king's. That's why he gave his armor to David, because nobody has armor. And that's why he's using a rock and a sling, because they don't have weapons. And so here's the battle that's taking place. And so David is now getting more, but David is learning the weaponry of the enemy. And so it's believed that when he went to be the Philistines, he learned how to make weapons and to armor his soldiers and gain more skills in warfare and so forth, believing that he's using it to help them. They're giving him basically these secrets. And so when David becomes king, he now knows how to fight. And so he raises up an army with these newfound skills and so forth, and weaponry and so forth, and then cleans house, because he's not only, for multiple reasons, now he has new weaponry, his new skills, but he also has God and a wisdom about him that the Philistines don't have, and uses everything. But again, all this is ordained by God. This is not like, this is God making all these. He's the one who takes David to be there and to get these skills and help him to grow in this way and so forth. And so it's a constant. That's what the reference in one chapter is. Yeah, he is going and subduing the Philistines, and then later there's more subduing that has to take place and so forth. But that battle was a continuing battle. But when David is established, especially in that last chapter that you're referring to, that's him really bringing it to a close, where David is now. Now he has shown he is this person, and not only subdues them, but subdues the Syrians, all the surrounding countries, and now where he's not fighting these as a small army anymore. Now his army becomes the army of the day, and Israel is established as a military power, which Solomon then enjoys as well. So that's why when the kingdom splits between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, the other armies around are like, now's our time to come back and bring them back into submission. And that really doesn't happen emphatically until Assyria comes in and takes out Israel. And so then you have the stories of where the kings of Israel are trying to negotiate, because you have these empires that are coming. And again, just another little thing. It's kind of like the Philistines would come up, and really, it's what's happening today. If you think of the Palestinians and the Gaza Strip and Israel and how it's in the West Bank and so forth, that territory is so vital on a trade route that it was always changing hands, and it was very strategic because it's right there between two massive continents. And so empires would, from Egypt to Persia, are trying to figure out who gets this little tiny strip of land, has a lot of power and ability because it's also fertile land. So you had all these hills and so forth, and so you're always battling for who's going to be king of the hill. And so it's I know another long answer to a short question, but that's why as you're reading it, it is, both are true, and that those battles were ongoing, but it's trying to tell you the story of here is David's ascent to power, and that whenever David went to battle, he won. Sometimes I read the Bible, and I know it's true, and I'm not trying to take away from it all, but it sure puts people in a more positive light than you think they deserve. I mean, when this was written by David, like when Moses is writing about Moses, you realize Moses is writing the book. He sure makes Moses sound really good at different times, and knowing he's writing it. Anyway, that's it's like. Yeah, Paul is much more humble in the way he describes himself, but anyway, that's it doesn't take away from the fact that the stories are true. It's just you got to always remember, these are written by people who are loyal to King David and are his servants, and he already is this incredible hero when the story's being written. So, anyway. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for the questions. Appreciate it. And just, man, it's been good to be back. We took a few weeks off, so there's kind of a gap. I don't feel too guilty about it, because if you're like, well, when are you going to talk about these passages of the Bible? We already did 2 years straight. So you can go back and if you're wondering about the gap of reading, you can go back and listen to previous podcasts. You may even hear Caleb back there on a previous podcast talking about passages we've already covered. But all that is available on our website. You can go back and listen to old Understanding Jesus podcast. Not all of it is on YouTube, but it is all in our on our podcast library out there on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and so many. And what is it? Is it Google Podcast? Is that what do they call that? I don't know. Anyway, it's out there. Google. I don't use it, but they have one. It's out there. You can listen. You can find it. But anyway, more podcasts than any human being should be allowed to listen to. But anyway, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for Jake and Caleb being here. And we got more amazing stuff next week as we continue to learn more about, I'm trying to find a way to wrap this up, learn more about God's Word as we are understanding Jesus. Woo, 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 woo. So, Austin, you want to be on the intro? You want to be part of the intro? Because you're never on the podcast, actually. So
well, it would be kind of weird if I was in the intro and then not in the entire rest of the podcast.
We could point out the weirdness of it. It's okay. Yeah.
I'll be in it if you want me to
I
be
want
in it.
you to be in it.
Okay.
I want
Absolutely.
you to be in it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you,
Or
Caleb.
Lord Lambert.
But I wasn't talking to you.
Future President Caleb Hitt wants you to be a part of
And
it.
current president of the Understanding Jesus podcast.
There you go.
You do what he wants.
Ooh. That's because you do what you want, right?
Do we have a podcast
I don't.
committee?
Do what?
Do we have a podcast committee?
We should.
You're looking at it right here, buddy. You're the president.
This is yeah. I think you're in charge of it.
That's right. You're in charge of it.
Speaking of Caleb, I need you to raise the budget a little bit because we need a new computer.
Yeah. We went from
Yeah,
having
on
no
it.
no computer, and then we get one, and it's like it's too small.
Well, it wasn't
bigger.
that. It was perfect for what we were doing at the time, but we've upgraded so much equipment
That's
that
true.
if we want to increase the quality anymore, we're gonna need a better computer.
Yeah. We're gonna need a bigger boat. Yeah, that's what it would be like at a budget meeting. We are gonna need a bigger boat because Jaws is coming to take us out. The Jaws of budget. Okay. All right. The intro. Here it comes.
All right.
And we're going to add Austin so we can talk about Austin leaving at the beginning.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Understanding Jesus podcast. I'm Pastor Troy Richards, and with me today, Mr. Jacob. Can I call you Jacob? It's okay.
Sure, you already did.
All
So
Let's
Too
say
late.
Jake White. Jake in all caps. Jake White. And Caleb Hitt. Welcome, Caleb.
Thank you.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, glad you're here today. And just kind of a brief, bring him into the spotlight for a moment before we send him back into the darkness. It's Austin Lambert.
Yes, my first and last appearance on screen.
That's right. We haven't any and the podcast. That's amazing. Normally he is making everything go well. In the unedited versions, he is there all the time. You hear him. You don't see him. But today, Austin is going to leave us to go to Orlando. So we thought
Yes.
we'd drag him in here and don't know because we don't know what kind of person you're going to come back. You've never done this before.
Yeah.
You've never gone to.
I'm
Orlando
gonna come back.
Project.
I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna be so tan. Like
I was more talking
and-
about how we don't know what God's going to do to you, more than.
no, I know that's what you were talking about, but I decided to go for a joke answer.
I meant the son kind of thing. Yeah.
See, I decided to go for a joke answer because there's no way I'm coming back more tan than I am now.
That's true. That's
Maybe
true.
your hair will be redder.
Pale is a thing. Yeah.
I wish that were the case. If anything, it'll be less red because of the sun bleach.
So you've got Sarah, who's a redhead, and Evan, who's a redhead, and you, who's a redhead,
Mhm.
and then Dylan is dyeing his hair red, as I understand, to go. No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
I don't know.
But like fire truck red, not
Okay.
like
Oh,
my
good,
red.
Good. Okay, good. Awesome. Good deal. Well, we're excited about you going down there, and
I'm excited too.
Yeah, and so look forward to seeing what weirdness comes back, and really not knowing what to expect. So, so you still, our hope is that you're still helping with the podcast while you're there.
Yes.
But we don't. We're also holding out that it could be a lot more than what you anticipate.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
okay.
my plan, because I can't help live, but my plan is to still edit and upload everything. But
Yeah.
there's a chance that doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And
Because we don't know how much time it's going to consume when you get there.
Right.
So we're prepared.
well,
prepared.
but some people who are going, I know, are taking summer classes, and so they're bringing their computers down to do homework
Oh,
and
okay.
stuff. So I assume it doesn't take long to
Since you're not doing
do
that,
the edit stuff.
right? You're not doing
Right.
summer classes, right?
No.
Okay, good.
I haven't taken a class since 2020.
That's right. I haven't either. I don't think. Yeah. So how about that? Yeah, maybe I have. I can't remember. It's all foggy. But anyway, we're excited about today. We are looking at we've been away for a little bit, but we're coming back with a fervor. We're doing 2 Samuel. We are hitting on the Proverbs 16. We spent some time looking at the amazing wonder of wisdom that is in Proverbs, and the Gospel of John. Caleb's going to take a look at the woman at the well. And we're going to spend some time talking about that, and also just some other things that God reveals. Jake has some amazing insights from Proverbs 16 that I'm looking forward to listening to. All that is ahead, and we still lack a commercial sponsor, but we will be back with all of it in just a moment. That's it, man. Wow, that was a labor of love. 3 o'clock.
Well, we've only been here for 3 hours and 15 minutes, so that went pretty quick.
Yeah, we're still live streaming.
Together for
You're
4
still on.
hours.
Hello. I
Okay.
know I've had to.
All
I'm
right.
so sorry that you
So-
have been with me for 4 hours, poor guy.
And I'm not.
All right, is that
tired of you.
are we done, or is that are we still streaming?
We're
Right?
still streaming. We can stop anytime
Okay.
you want.
All right.